Thank you, Professor Shin, for your remarks, which very fittingly lead us into the first session of the day, focusing on putting climate change at the heart of education. There is a growing global momentum to harness the power of education to empower the next generation with the values, knowledge, and skills to act as agents of change for climate change. I'm very excited to welcome Ms. Susannah Morley, Director of British Council in Hong Kong, and our panelists to the stage. A reminder that the Q&A function for this session is now live on your event app. So please do submit your questions via the page for this session in the event app from now until the end of the session. Over to you, Susannah.
Welcome to this, can you hear me all right? Everybody, and a warm welcome to this discussion about putting climate change at the heart of education. I'm your moderator today, and I'm joined on the stage here by 4 distinguished panelists. So to my immediate left is Hermia Chan. Hermia, would you introduce yourself, please?
Thank you, Susie, and thank you for having me. I am a 5th-year global studies student studying at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Aside from my study, I also work on youth empowerment and also climate education. And more than that, me and my friend Mark over there, we co-founded the Network of Environmental Student Society, trying to talk about and bring awareness to the interdisciplinary nature of climate change and showcasing the opportunities other than just like for environmental focused subjects, but also all the sectors, all the subjects, and all the fields in the society, how can they contribute to sustainability?
Wow, that's pretty broad. Thank you very much, Hermia. Next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Shauhrat Chopra, Assistant Professor from the School of Energy and Environment at City University from Hong Kong.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for having me. I'm Dr. Chopra from City University of Hong Kong at the School of Energy and Environment. My work is mostly focused on quantifying sustainability through data and from a systems perspective. So we can basically apply our methodologies to various sectors. So I'm equally broad looking in terms of the scope when it comes to sustainability. So very happy to share my insights as well from for education and moving education and sustainability forward in Hong Kong.
Thank you very much, Shauhrat. Natalie Chung, who's Sustainability Lead at DFI Retail Group. Natalie, please introduce yourself.
Yep, great. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for all the other speakers sharing. I'm Natalie. I'm the Sustainability Lead at DFI Retail Group. We are a Jardine Matheson company, and we're a leading pan-Asian retailer with multi-brands. So we operate things that you can see around your daily life, like welcome stores, 7-Eleven, and etc. And because our group as a whole operating in 12 Asian markets, we have over 230,000 employees in the entire group. So there are lots of opportunities to educate our team members, store members on climate change and the importance of factoring these sustainability metrics into our product design, into our store operation, etc. And I look forward to the discussion talking about how to educate people in an interdisciplinary manner so that they're able to embed sustainability practices in daily operations.
Thank you very much, Natalie. And last but by no means least, I'd like to introduce Mark Harper, Group Head of Sustainability at John Swire & Sons. Mark.
Hi. So I'm Mark. I'm Group Head of Sustainability at Swire. So that's at the holding company level. So that has responsibility over Swire Properties, Swire Coca-Cola, Cathay Pacific, Heiko. So the diverse group of companies that operate under the Swire umbrella. I guess I'm closer to retirement than the last time I was in formal education. So my role here really is to talk about what the needs of the corporate sector are for the next generation of graduates that are moving into the sustainability space. So I'll talk about that, and I'll also talk about what we're doing within the Swire Group to prepare our employees and engage them on our sustainability strategy, Swire Thrive.
Great, thank you very much. So let's move on to the first question. I wanted to start by quoting from the Hong Kong Climate Action Plan, which was published in October last year. And it states two key objectives for education. The first one is capacity building, and the second one is enriching learning content. So when it comes to capacity building, the government wants to nurture talent and enhance cooperation and exchange among universities and tertiary institutions to allow teachers and students to equip themselves with up-to-date and relevant knowledge and skills. And from an enriching learning content perspective, the government says that the strengthening of learning materials and the provision of diversified learning experiences can enhance students' awareness and promote low carbon transformation. So those are two very ambitious objectives. So what do you think the current state of play is in Hong Kong? You know, how central and visible is education? And is the power of education being appropriately harnessed? Now, that's quite a broad question. And I'm going to ask Hermia to kick off, given that she is the closest, perhaps, to the education sector, still being in it as an undergraduate. Hermia,
Thank you very much. I have to say, fairly speaking, there has been a lot of changes in my past 5 years of university life. There has been more resources pulled to the, let's say, Common Core or general education, talking more about SDGs, allowing students who are not from the sustainability majors to learn about the issues, but usually from a very broad and brief kind of manner. Whereas a lot of resources or connections are pulled towards those who are studying in sustainability-related subjects, for example, geography or energy engineering. But for me, as a social science student, it's kind of hard for me to find a path that is clear to me how exactly I can get into the sustainability field, despite how interdisciplinary and how broadly covered it is in the societies. So that, I think, is a huge gap that we need to bridge, allowing people who are not traditionally from the sustainability-related subjects to get inside and give insight from the outsider insight to the sustainability field.
Thank you very much for that, Hermia. Perhaps we can come back to the lack of perceived clarity in terms of future pathways in a moment. But I'd like to ask you, Shauhrat, the same question from the perspective of an educator and a researcher.
Right. So, as I completely agree with Hermia that, there's still siloed nature of education that makes it difficult for all the students to clearly see how they can actually participate in the workforce in the doing something related to sustainability. However, in the past 5 years, there's greater interest in breaking these silos, if you will, and connecting. And in sustainability education, the idea is to promote interdisciplinary education. And we're not talking about carbon neutrality alone. I mean, climate change is not going to be solved by carbon neutrality. We have to go carbon negative, and for that, everybody has to participate. And so that means that we need an interdisciplinary workforce, thought processes, take a very systems perspective in solving these very challenging problems by having systemic changes. And I'll give you an example of the changes that are occurring right now. Say for right now, there's a consortium of all the campuses, as you pointed out from the climate action plan. On the basis of that, this consortium is pooling all of these. Actually, I have Davis right here, and I'm pitching the consortium's work on benchmarking and mapping all the SDGs to all of the courses that are being offered and all of the universities in Hong Kong for undergraduate studies, which is a big step, because then first we know what are we teaching, then next we can move on to improving the delivery of the content. So it's in the process. I would say we aren't there yet, but we definitely realize, as Hermia pointed, that there's a gap that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, we'll come back to that in a minute when we talk about pathways. I'd also like Natalie also to comment, as somebody who has fairly recently joined the workforce and is kind of putting all of this learning into practice in your role?
Sure. So I guess I generally agree with what Hermia and Dr. Chopra has said. And I guess I could also add some of my personal experience of studying a master's in University of Oxford in environmental management. I remember from my class, actually, there were only me and 3 other people among 30 students in total who studied geography or environmental-related subjects to pursue that master in environmental management. All the other students come from undergraduate backgrounds from all different countries, like finance, marketing, and etc. And so I believe there is huge potential in developing this postgraduate market in training sustainable development talents, because you don't really need an undergraduate background in this particular subject. And what they contributed to the discussion in a master's degree is that they were able to put in some multiple perspective into analyzing a single issue. For example, when we're looking at cocoa farming in Ghana, whether that is sustainable practice and smallholder farming, indigenous community protection. Some of the students who studied psychology before were able to contribute to some thoughts on how to improve the social safeguards instead of just talking about carbon offsets or carbon credits, or even just attaching these carbon credits to trees. So I believe this kind of multidisciplinary thought processes is very important and crucial for training our next generation sustainability leaders.
Mark,
Yeah, I sort of touched on it at the start, but it's 20 years since I was last in formal education. So when I went to university, there wasn't courses on sustainability. It was conservation, it was ecology. I studied ecology at university. So the academic path, the career path wasn't necessarily there when I went to school. And quite interestingly, when I came to Hong Kong over 9 years ago, again, there wasn't really that many courses. Each university probably had 1 or 2 courses on sustainability, but thanks to efforts from people like Davis and the like, there's been a massive explosion of courses around sustainability. The government's put a lot of funding behind courses as well, particularly around green finance, although I would want to point out to them, I think, that only about 10% of Hong Kong's population work in finance, and so there's a need for looking at sustainability from the point of view of the other industries as well, and investing in training around that. I think there's also an element around further education for adults and people who are wanting to make that transition to sustainability careers. I probably get about 5 LinkedIn messages a week from people who are wanting to change career path and are wanting to speak to someone about how do they make that transformation, what's the career trajectory look like. And so I think there's a need for the institutions that are providing adult education to look at sustainability, look at the opportunities around sustainability, particularly in relation to the reindustrialization plan for Hong Kong. What are the opportunities around green industry in Hong Kong? We've seen the latest news around Mill, which is tragic. There's a need for educating the government, but also industry around the opportunities that sustainability provides.
so it sounds to me that there are a couple of things here. One is that perhaps there's not an understanding either from the graduate or from the employer how skills might be transferable from what you've learned at university and how those might be applied in the workplace to develop a more sustainable approach to business. And on the flip side, the employer looks at a graduate like Hermia or Natalie and doesn't really understand the skill set that they've required. So it seems to me that there's a translation gap here, and that if we can bridge that translation gap, then perhaps the pathways would seem a lot clearer. I wanted to sort of build on this idea because I think there's a link here with climate literacy. Now, this is a phrase that's bandied about a lot. But do you think that everybody has a shared understanding of what this means, given the comments that you've just made. And perhaps I could start again with Hermia and get your take on what climate literacy actually means.
To me, for climate literacy, I believe is the understanding of the cause and impact of climate change, but also the opportunity brought by climate change. But there is the translation gap, as you mentioned, within university level, but also in secondary school or primary school level. A very simple example, how many faculty of education actually teach the future educators about climate change? Do they feel equipped? Do they feel confident to teach about the younger students, the younger children about climate change and what opportunity, not just the threat, but also the opportunity brought by climate change so that they do not suffer from climate anxiety, so that they don't feel like the world is doomed and there's no future. So I think there are a lot that we can do to improve climate literacy, but most importantly, it's important for us to stay hopeful despite the urgency of climate change. And how do we stay hopeful is to talk about the opportunities that brought by climate change, the solutions that we have for climate change nowadays, and how can you, as an individual, aside from all the daily actions, reducing use of energy, reducing plastic pollution, can I shape a career path that is about climate change? As a student, as a young child, apart from taking the street or going to school strikes, what else can I do to address this issue? And I think showcasing these opportunities in education is very, very important for us.
Thank you for that, Hermia. I wonder whether Dr. Chopra, you could comment on what being climate literate means from the perspective of an academic when you're trying to assemble a multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary team to look at a particular aspect of climate change or sustainability. Do you find that you're having to educate your fellow educators?
Oh, definitely. I mean, educating educators is just a part of the process of evolving and training that one needs to go through for as more information comes to light and through research in sustainability education. So I definitely agree that there's a great need for training and upskilling of existing workforce engaged in the education sector, as it could be senior secondary school, high school teachers, or it could be undergrad professors. I mean, it's not that long ago. It was 1987 when we got the definition for sustainable development, right? It's not that all of us are very well versed with all of these technical terms, like say climate literacy, right? It may mean a lot of different things to a lot of people, but for me, I think what the essence that we would like to convey to people is how everything is connected, and and how all of us are in this together. I think getting these 2 points across in terms of communicating various stakeholders, especially from a justice point of view, where climate justice is at the heart of it, where folks who haven't created any of haven't contributed to the problem are facing the brunt of it, right? So they need to really understand, and I actually don't mind folks advocating for making those changes once they understand how climate change is affecting them. So climate literacy is, of course, not just limited to the classroom. It has to happen throughout the society, and that's why all of the stakeholders here, from the large businesses to academics, as well as NGOs, right? Just like Hermia's NGO, working with environmental students, but it could be any student for that matter, should understand how they're connected to the problem.
Absolutely, thank you. I wanted to move the conversation on a little bit,
Susannah, could I just quickly come in on that? So I think from a literacy point of view, there's a need to engage other disciplines in climate change. So it's not just the case of learning about climate change through science courses. Climate change should be built into economics courses, into business courses, and in my role, I've been asked to comment on certain master's courses or business courses around sustainability. And I've been quite depressed, actually, by the content that I've seen, which still approaches it from it's a good thing to do, it's a moral thing to do, it's the right thing to do, as opposed to it being key to your business surviving into the future. So I think there's that need for integrating it into multiple disciplines, but there's also, if one thing has landed to me, and hopefully it's landed to everyone else from this conference, is the urgency of the crisis that we're dealing with here. And I think we need to go beyond literacy. It's not just the case of understanding what climate change is, it's climate competency. And climate competency is what universities should be teaching. What should individuals, once they move into the workplace, what should they be doing? Where are the opportunities? What's the business models that actually support a transition to a low carbon future? That's a competency point, it's not literacy. And so I think there needs to be that transition within the academic world away from teaching science for science sake and actually moving into the applied nature of climate change. Everyone should know what climate change is now. It should be taught in high school and in primary school. It shouldn't be a requirement for university. That's when we should be moving into competency level.
Can I quickly jump in as well?
Yeah, for sure.
I definitely agree with the pure science approach to climate change is not working that well. I mean, we all understand the idea of having too much greenhouse gases right now and the earth is warming, but we don't know as much about the social impact of it. How is it affecting the societies? In Hong Kong, we see heat waves at heat wave. It's just this year being, again, record-breakingly hot. But we don't understand, or newspaper, they will not tell you that it's because of climate change. Or seeing Pakistan, there are so many very obvious climate emergency situations that is happening across the globe right now. But do that reflect on our education system? Do that reflect on the materials that we're having? Do people see climate change as a threat to human life instead of just mere science? I think getting that message across is very, very important as well.
So I think what you're saying here is we've really got to break down those interdisciplinary silos. We have to see climate change holistically. So from an academic perspective, from a research perspective, from understanding what is going on with our climate and how it's impacting our lives. But I think Mark is also saying that from a business perspective, you have to see the impact of climate change as holistically. You can't see it through the lens of one particular or two sectors.
Sure, yeah, I mean, if I was just listening to Paul Pullman talk before I came over, but all of the talks that we've heard over the last 2 days talk about the need for corporate action and the interdisciplinary element of it. So how sustainability is linked to risk management, how it's linked into product development, how it's linked into marketing, how it's linked into the core nature of a business. And that requires a fundamental different skill set to what sustainability practitioners used to have. When I moved into the space, sustainability people had to produce a sustainability report and calculate the greenhouse gas footprint. You still need that, but to drive change within an organization, and ultimately a sustainability practitioner has to be a change agent. To be a change agent, you need fundamental different skill sets, particularly soft skills. And so there's a need for academia to actually maybe engage with the corporate community to sort of ask sustainability departments what kind of skills they need for the future graduates, and then work with them to make sure that the sustainability leaders of the future are actually getting that skill set, because there's a war on talent at the moment. There's a fundamental shortage, not just in Hong Kong, but globally around sustainability practitioners. And so there's going to be a need for rapid upskilling of graduates to prepare them for the workplace. Otherwise, businesses are really, really going to struggle to be able to achieve the targets and the goals that they have to achieve because of that lack of a knowledgeable and skilled talent pool.
I'd like to bring Natalie in here as somebody who has fairly recently joined the workplace, and you're kind of on you started your professional journey, and also I think you've been pioneering in your company in terms of your role. What's your experience of I suppose the wider knowledge of your colleagues in understanding, your role and what you're trying to achieve in the organisation?
Great. So I totally echo with what Mark mentioned, how important it is to bring climate change to the front and center of the business because it's crucial for our future development and growth. And from my personal experience, we started to engage our team members into the discussion of climate change through a gamified way. So one time we organized a Climate Fest game for our team members, and we actually had attention from over 30 of them from different markets, someone coming from Singapore, Malaysia. They all wanted to learn more about the impacts and causes of climate change. And I think this is a great way to engage different departments and functions into this discussion because it is just a simple card game where you can do it virtually or in person, and they can have a discussion on thinking about how climate change actually influences different sectors, including food security, some of our personal health, public health pandemic. And I think it was a useful occasion to help different functions understand how climate change could impact their stream of work, such as people who are in charge of sourcing, how they can source more responsibly, which is also one of our sustainability pillars at DFI, hoping to look for sustainable materials to source while also balancing our business profits so that to enable employees to be able to find that balance, understand that climate change might not necessarily mean additional cost, because if we're able to install some energy efficient equipment in our stores, we're able to save a lot of electricity costs, and this will benefit our business. So I think education does not only take place in schools or at academic institutions, but it also takes place at our workplace, having e-learning modules for some of the frontline team members to understand why is it so important to recycle food waste, and how does these food waste get transformed into biogas, renewable energy that can help Hong Kong reach the carbon neutrality goal.
Thank you very much for that, Natalie. Actually, that's something I'd like to pick up on, and to think about the people who are already in the workforce. And, Hong Kong has sort of 3 or 4 really prominent sectors, one of them being the financial services and banking sector. And I'm just wondering, perhaps this is a question for Mark, how do we ensure that we bring along those employees who are perhaps in roles that right now do not seem to be sustainable? How do we ensure that they get adequate training to move into new industries as they evolve, as our approach to sustainability develops? What do you think the actions of the business sector should be?
Sure. If you don't mind, I'll broaden the question a little bit, sort of build off what Natalie was saying, because, I talked about the fact that there's a global shortage of ESG talent, that there's been an exodus of people sustainability practitioners leaving Hong Kong, but also this massive rise in demand for sustainability practitioners, which has left this gap. It's really exciting to see the young pool of talent that's coming through. So I think that's a massive positive. But there's I guess this is me throwing a gauntlet down to the corporate community in Hong Kong, because we failed to educate our employees around what are the skills and abilities that they're going to need as sustainability practitioners in the future. I talked about the fact that at the moment, or historically, sustainability people just had to collect data, produce a sustainability report. And we've just gone through a massive recruitment process. And I was depressed, quite frankly, at the end of it, around the level of skills and how their employers had failed their workers to actually upskill them for the skills that they will need to really embed sustainability within their organization. And to me, there are fundamental soft skills that need to be brought in. So, people need to be a sustainability practitioner. You need to be a change agent. So you really need strong communication skills. You need to be able to translate complicated climate change or plastic waste issues into language that is easily understandable by different people within the organization. if I spoke to the CEO as I would speak to a sustainability practitioner, if I spoke to the head of procurement in the same way that I speak to my colleagues, they won't understand what I'm talking about. So there's that need to work on those communication skills. There's the need to look at future thinking. There's so many emerging issues, whether it's biodiversity, whether it's around a just transition, that workers in the future are going to need to understand. So future thinking skills is something that we're going to need to train our workers on. We're going to need to work on storytelling skills. There's so many different soft skills that sustainability practitioners will need, and they've not been taught, whether that's at university, but it's also a failure within the businesses that they work in. So there's what we're doing internally. We're setting up a training academy for all of our sustainability practitioners, but also the plan is to open that up to related disciplines as well. So I'm trying to put a positive spin on it, but I'm really, really struggling because
Let me try.
ultimately there is this gap. There's this massive skill gap that needs to be filled, and at the moment, corporate training programs are not equipped to do that.
Shauhrat, I think you want to comment.
Yeah, I think this is exactly what we also have realized from the university's perspective, because a lot of our partners from the industry come to us with demands for certain skill sets, and what we do is we sort of respond by offering new courses, changing our curriculum. The process may be lagging. I mean, because I wouldn't say that the communication is not as swift as, say, this panel, right? But the idea is that we are more focused on reskilling our alumni who've passed out in the recent years with the latest requirements that are coming out. So it could be the latest standards, or it could be ESG for that matter. Now, how do we do this at a much higher scale and across different disciplines? Because we at School of Energy and Environment are training energy engineers and environmental engineers. For them, the gap is on understanding the financial aspects of ESG that they might not be too comfortable with, but they're okay with the E pillar. And so for us, bridging the other S and G pillar gaps is a clear sort of goals that we could strive to in creating our curriculums. And the same way, what I would like to say is that there are other programs. It's the School of Psychology. I think that was a great example. And I think sort of what you also pointed out, that it's not just about the School of Energy and Environment. It actually has to be done at this university level in partnership with organizations like yours to have this constant pipeline of new training modules. They don't have to be full-length degree programs. They could be shorter, bite-sized top-ups that could bridge that gap.
I'd like to reflect a little bit on what the two of you have said, because to me it sounds like what we need is a mainstreaming approach. That when we're thinking about climate, and we've got to stop thinking about climate and environment as being something other. It needs to be, our thinking about it needs to be embedded right across the school and higher education curriculum. So no matter what you're studying, there is always in the back of the undergraduate or the educator's mind, well, how does this relate to the future sustainability of the planet? And I guess, Mark, to your point about, feeling slightly, slightly pessimistic about how these skills are not being developed amongst the workforce, that actually this has to be seen as a mainstream aspect of learning and development, regardless of what sector you're operating in.
Yeah, I mean, they say that the first thing you need to do in solving a problem is realize that there is one, right? And so there is a fundamental problem in how corporate training is conducted around sustainability issues. And so, if you look at some of the recent regulations, you've got the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, you've got ISSB, apologies for the non-sustainability people in the room, that's rearing its head, and it will be coming very, very soon. that's not something that a sustainability practitioner on their own can address. You know, I can conduct a climate change scenario analysis within the organization and tell them what the climate risks are that the business is facing, whether it's physical or transitional risk. But translating that into how that's going to impact on our revenue and our costs, on the risks of stranded assets, that's an accountant's job. That's an economist's job. And if they're not being trained on how climate change impacts on the financial stability of the organization, then there's a real risk that we're not going to be able to meet these new regulatory requirements. And to me, that's the concern, really. And that can only come through embedding climate change competency within broader academic disciplines at a university level, at a professional training level, so that these professionals coming into the workplace or already within the workplace can actually support, and we can move away from the siloing of sustainability, of just it sitting in a department on its own in a dark corner of the office that no one goes to speak to, you know.
Natalie, not Natalie, sorry, Hermia, I think you want to come in here.
Yes, please. I also want to highlight another language problem, but other than, I mean, climate change is a very complicated topic, and it has a lot of difficult language that is not easy to understand for a lot of people, including myself. We have so many short forms for everything. And other than that, it's a simple language problem. Hong Kong, we have two official languages, Chinese and English. All of our discussion here today is in English. I myself is still struggling to find a proper translation for climate mitigation, climate adaptation, climate resilience. All these ideas very embedded in English, but it's a huge struggle for us working with students, or even students who are not very good at English, to understand what is resilience or climate resilience, and how does that translate to like real life scenarios. And I think bridging that gap, or seen that gap, is actually a huge threat to just transition. How can we ensure people who cannot go to university, or their interest is not in university, not being a professional, but maybe in vocational training, how can we ensure these batch of people still having climate change mainstream in their education or in their training, so that we leave no one behind in Hong Kong just transition?
Yeah, so just quickly jumping onto that, as we're a retailer, we have a lot of frontline store members who are also relatively, most of them are Cantonese speaking, and they might not understand these complex climate jargons and dictionaries. So I think it's very important to translate that into action. Our facilities management director is here. He actually run a series of very effective energy behavioral change program to our store members, so they understand why is it so important to switch off the lights, and whether it's better to switch off the aircon for 30 minutes because there are some myths around if you switch it off for too long, too short, then you will waste more energy. But then we need to communicate it properly to the frontline members to let them know what is the proper practice to really save energy, save refrigerants, reduce leakage, and also save packaging and recycle properly. So I think detailing these instructions to them and to enable them to understand the purpose and showcasing these through some of the visits that we can organize for them to visit a recycling plant, so they can see how their efforts can translate to real work and get rewarded by it. Because I think a lot of the times when we talk about climate change mitigation or adaptation resilience, us as a corporate might be benefiting on the numbers or on the reputation, but then the store members might not be able to understand what that all extra work or extra effort mean to themselves or mean to their lives. So I think it's important to close this gap by showcasing them and sharing the benefits with them, with the communities, and with our frontline store members who help us carry out all these climate mitigation measures with their hard work.
May I also jump
do.
in there? I think this is a great conversation that we're having about communicating the complexity around climate change. And one simple thing could be, say, putting a number on carbon emissions, right? A lot of companies are interested in doing that, but that number is not really telling anything to a lot of people because they can't really connect with that number. And so identifying the right proxies, say for example, a kilometer of riding on the MTR maybe is as immersive as that. That could sort of create that equation for folks to get that emotional or immersive connection with that carbon dioxide number. something like that is very important as well. Of course, the academics are working towards it, including myself. But these kinds of effort and required to get the local population of anywhere in the world. I mean, to translate what connects with the population is very important.
Thank you very much. I think what you're reflecting on here is that it's all very well having, knowledge embedded into in the university sector and what's being taught to undergraduates, and even at schools level. That's all very important. But you've got to be able to find a means of communicating that. It's got to be in the appropriate language, understandable language, and it's got to be made accessible to everybody. So I think this is another gap that you're articulating here, Mark. I think you want to comment.
Yeah, it's just a thought that occurred to me. So, I talked about that I'm closer to retirement than I am to formal education. It took me 20. I've been working in sustainability now for over 20 years. It took me 15 years to get into an in-house corporate position because there were so few of them around, and so the career path was quite a long one. So over that time, I've been able to sort of like develop a lot of the skills that I will need for the position that I'm in now. Because of the talent gap that we're now experiencing, the career path for the future leaders is going to be a lot shorter. So, there's part of me that's very, very jealous. It took me 15 years before I started to be able to earn a half-decent living, but for future graduates, they're going to be able to move into well-paying sustainability jobs relatively quickly now. But I think there's a challenge there, but there's also an opportunity. So the challenge is that the learning curve for the future sustainability practitioners, for them to be coming into a role and being effective, is going to be significantly shorter. So there's the gap that we've traditionally been able to fill by in-house training is going to need to be pre-filled. A lot of that's going to need to be pre-filled within academia. So whilst they're at university, there's going to be a need for degrees to, obviously, there's a need to continue with the climate literacy piece, the technical, the science aspect, but there's also now, I think, a vital need for building in that competency piece, building in the applied nature around how does this actually translate into driving organizational change, because that transformation that businesses need to do is so fundamental.
So there needs to be, I think what I'm hearing from you is that there needs to be a closer connection between the universities and the industries that they're going into.
Definitely.
And how do you, I know that this is something that this is an area that you're working in. How do you think, going back to bridging gaps again, how do you think that particular industry university gap can be bridged?
They've been. This is not the first kind, or in terms of like a co-op program where students would take a gap year and go into the industry, work, and then come back. That's a pretty standard model that has been applied to engineering degrees sectors mostly. I think it's not a bad idea to do it with sustainability-related fields because. Sustainability is a very applied nature. I mean, I can teach you a lot about sustainability through lectures, but once you actually apply it and do it yourself, you will embody that learning, and that's actually what will stay with you for a longer period of time than just cramming for an exam. And so at School of Energy and Environment, we have the Industry Ready program that requires students to have a minimum of 160 hours of training at a recognized internship with a partner that we identify for them. We have actually more internships that we offer to our students than our students themselves. So, we have more positions. Our students are very lucky, but it's not that clear for everybody because it's only true for like the 60 odd that we train. But there's a lot more students who would like to have those opportunities, but they just don't know how to get that connect. So I think it's going beyond the School of Energy Environment and going across universities and between universities and creating some sort of a job portal. I don't know, is something that that is quite important.
Hermia, perhaps you'd like to comment on that.
I agree. First of all, as a social science major student, a lot of the opportunity that my university sent to me will be social aspect related, social service related. Rarely I see sustainability options, and once there's sustainability like analysis, and they will require 1 to 2 years of training, or you're from a business or finance background. So seeing that gap is still existing right now in my university life. I talked to some very good friends in the science faculty. They're doing chemistry major. They have very huge interest in sustainability, but all of the job opportunities, the career, internship opportunities are given to environmental science students. So still, we are talking about the mainstreaming problem, and that, especially opportunity-wise, job skills-wise, is not being mainstream across the university in different levels. So allow me to do a little bit of shameless plug. Next, we're trying to do a job fair next year to actually showcase the green sustainable opportunities in Hong Kong. So talk to me afterwards, everyone, if you're interested. Sorry.
I think that's really important, because that's what you were saying about the career coaches within the university steering you away from sustainability jobs. That depresses me, because I looked on, in preparation for this call, I looked on LinkedIn this morning and JobsDB. There's over 200 sustainability jobs, or with sustainability in the title, being advertised in Hong Kong alone. So that worries me.
Is there a sort of gap in understanding? I'm thinking about role of parents here and their aspirations for their children. Is it because perhaps moving into sustainability isn't seen as a sort of profession that you should be pursuing? You know, there's still a mindset that, you know, you should be a lawyer or a doctor or an engineer, but sustainability is just because it's not so well understood, going back to climate literacy amongst perhaps parents. Is this an issue that we're grappling with?
I personally really hope to see sustainability as the next STEM education, to have as much resources that is put into sustainability and as much emphasis put into sustainability. As Mark said, there has been a lot more green jobs, sustainability-related jobs in the market right now. And it's very lucky for my generation to see a career path. It's not just like a sectors, but actually seeing the path. You have opportunity to get to a higher position is being valued in a company. But again, I think a lot of positions that you're seeing probably are managerial role that is in a company. And without the manager, without a person who is skilled, who can manage a team, how can we entry-level workers get into the team if the person who is leading is not there yet? So it's just like difficult for us right now.
Yeah, I guess ending on a more hopeful remark. So recently, actually, Hong Kong set up a Hong Kong Institute for Qualified Environmental Professional, and they're hoping to onboard more companies. For example, CLP is part of their program, where they start to have an examination to recognize environmental professionals around Hong Kong who have the similar accreditation as engineers, so they can get the promotion into environmental protection department and all the other career tracks. So I guess more corporates joining these coalitions, forming and refining the examination system to enable sustainability professionals to be seen and identified in a structured manner would be a good talent pipeline training for Hong Kong in the future.
One last comment, Mark, and
just,
then we must
just
wrap.
to build off that, so the Business Environment Council is also setting up a similar initiative to HKIQEP. They really needed a better acronym than that. But for sustainability people, because an environmental manager is a very different skill set to a sustainability manager. So check out BEC's website as well, because they're providing a lot of the courses and a lot of the training that will equip people to take these roles. Cambridge Institute for Sustainable Leadership also does some amazing courses in that space.
Thank you so much. I'm going to have to bring things to a close now. Thank you so much to our panel for such an interesting and diverse discussion. I think we've identified several areas where we need to look at. We need to look at how to get interdisciplinary cooperation going, collaboration between industry and academia. We need to find ways of communicating what climate and environment sustainability is across the entire population. We need to look at language, both in terms of how we use, how we translate technical terms into Cantonese, and there needs to be a mainstreaming of climate and environment and sustainability education across both across the education sector and across industries. So thank you so much, and thank you to our audience for listening.
Thank you so much, Susannah and your panelists, for a very insightful discussion on building that talent pipeline from schools to universities to the workplace.